Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest edition of Wearing Power Armor to a Magic School. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 67, A Princess and a Knight. We return to what was, for all intents and purposes, the closest thing to a portal to Earth, re-entering the blackout tent in a tentative silence. The entire space was quiet, more relaxed as a burden of balancing belief from disbelief was removed from our shoulders, now replaced with only a giddy desire to show what was already accepted as a fact by the sole patron of the cinematic experience. The princess's eyes glistened and widened as the whir of the projector arms reached its peak, hitting its operating speeds at about the same time as its movement became an indistinct blur. A white, featureless void quickly enveloped the pitch-black confines of the blackout tent, and with it came the return of a world that was just as fantastical to those in the realm of fantasy as the realm of swords and sorcery was to us. Chunk by chunk, the space was carefully filled in, the white void being replaced by the exact frame of view that we'd ended and not a few moments earlier. The rooftop park. The surround sound, audio courtesy of Colby Digital, followed soon after, prompting the princess's feathers to ruffle, if only for a fraction of a second. "Sorry," I started off sheepishly. No, that's quite all right," Dacia responded promptly. "I'm assuming there's probably some sensory confusion going on, right? Judging by what Dalman stated earlier, your sightseers seem to have the ability to replicate a truly fully immersive experience, meaning smell and physical sensations probably accompanying sights and sounds." "That is correct, Emma," the Avanar nodded, "which means only having some elements of the world rather than all of it. It is probably just going to cause a bit of sensory confusion, such as in the case of hearing a wind without actually feeling the wind," I half pondered, more or less letting my thoughts take control of the conversation, if only for a moment, as Thasia confirmed my suspicions with another tactful nod. "Yes, however, the physical senses are but one aspect of the disorientation stemming from the conflict of the senses. There is also the lack of replicatable mana stream to consider, which colors your sightseer in an almost lifeless haze," the princess expressed with a blunt honesty that was both surprising and refreshing in equal measures. Well, there's not much I can do about that, I suppose, but thankfully it seems like the other two took it quite well, despite the shortcomings of the projector, and was probably going to be seen by most as the reddest of red flags when it comes to the believability of the whole thing. The fact that the pair have had a full week of constant and unrepentant exposure to your mannerless artifices may have aided in the suspension of disbelief, Dacia responded. Moreover, the delivery of information in a reductive and generalized manner, targeting the core controversies of a world of mannerless predispositions, more than likely worked out for the better. The mannerless thing was something we needed to clear up right off the bat, so that was my intent, yeah. You gotta break through the false preconceptions before addressing finer particularities, I shrugged. But reasoning aside, let's skip the business and work analytics to get to the heart of why we're here, I announced excitedly, gesturing to the skies above us and the thin grey line that hovered above our heads ominously. With a wordless nod of approval from Thasia, I snapped my fingers once more, the EVI helpfully adding in the sound of a snap to compensate for the auditory encumbrance of the glove. The world soon began to shift shortly after. But instead of immediately swapping over to night, the EVI chose to gradually shift the time of day hour by hour, as the sun above us gradually began its journey across the skies, hopefully mitigating any sensory whiplash the sudden shift to night would have otherwise caused. This allowed both of us to relax as the white noise that was the city's constant hustle and bustle faded into the distance, superimposed instead by the wind chimes of the rooftop park. "Evie, some music. Start playlist. Hi-fi beats to relax to, please," they acknowledged. Soon enough, the wind chimes themselves were gradually replaced by the soft and cheery tunes of the woodwinds and acoustic guitars playing a cover of some 29th century pop song. The music started up in sync to the arrival of the faceless band, the integrated omnidirectional audio system not simply playing the music over the top of us like some cheap 21st century hollow, but actually taking into account the perceived source of the music and directing the audio accordingly. The faceless group, dressed in an assortment of eclectic clothes, typical of your public patronage-sponsored musical indie group, serenaded the arrival of the orange and red sunset over the harbor as the light show was what the city's transition from day to night truly began, with district after district lighting up in a brilliant display of artificial colors from the fluorescent white to Daytona oranges and everything in between, beating back the night with the power of electricity. Thasia's eyes, whilst fixed on the skies above, occasionally looked over towards the recent additions to the scene, namely the band and the rapidly brightening city. Just before the night properly fell, her eyes shifted towards one of the park benches as she gestured towards it with a polite, amicable smile. "I suppose we can't watch the sun setting from there, Emma?" I blinked, cocking my head in confusion. "Unfortunately, the limitations of the projection means that everything you see isn't actually physically interactable." I paused, interrupted by another surge of mana radiation that was dutifully reported to me courtesy of the newly implemented mana radiation notification hub. Thasia walked wordlessly soon after towards the bench just to the right of us and sat down, her body actually making contact with the hologram. It took me a few seconds to actually figure out what was happening, but it didn't take me that long to realize the clever use of magic here, and the strange marriage of technologically derived scenery and magically derived physicality that came together to add just an extra level of immersiveness that wouldn't have been possible before. "This is exceedingly clever, Thasia," I acknowledged with a smile, prompting the princess to simply crane her head towards me, nodding and gesturing to the empty space next to her on the park bench. "You know, I was always going to suggest that we sit on the floor before you pulled this stunt." "That would have been completely unacceptable, Emma," Thasia responded, her tone bordering somewhere between being offended and openly chastising me for even suggesting that. But just as quickly as those words were uttered, so too did the follow-up come, lacking any sort of royal indignancy that came from it. "Of course, you would not have known that to be unacceptable given our cultural differences. So I do apologize for any insinuation of a lack of tact on your part." "None taken, Princess. I admit it would have been an extremely poor taste for me to have even offered that to a noble, let alone a princess, no less," I responded with a cheeky smile. "So I beg for your forgiveness, Your Grace," I offered out teasingly. Thasia's features visibly shifted at that, her feathers ruffling and her gaze immediately averting from me as she'd been immediately flustered by that little jab. If she had cheeks to blush with, I was more than certain she'd have transitioned from bird of prey to cockatiel right about now, what with the signature bright orange and red cheeks. "I assure you, Emma, there is no need for such requests of amnesty. I truly do not wish to imply—" No, you're fine, Thasia. I meant that in jest," I interrupted with an awkward chuckle, raising both my hands up for added effect as I attempted to diffuse the very situation I incited. Though it was soon to become clear that wouldn't have been necessary at all, because the simple act of sitting down would more or less act as the off-ramp for this whole awkwardness, by bringing in some new awkwardness to focus on. As the moment I attempted to sit down on the seemingly solid bench courtesy of Thasia's magic, I was met not with the reassuring sturdiness of a seat, but nothing at all. My heart immediately dropped to my stomach, and before I could even properly react, I would sit with the familiar feeling that you get when you miss a step on a flight of stairs. With it came the titular "oh shit, oh crap, oh no," followed not a half-second later by a loud metallic clank as I just narrowly avoided hitting the rails just a helmet's length away from me. Thasia's flustered expression immediately vanished, replaced instead by confusion, concern, and realization in that order, followed up closely in tow by an apologetic look of worry as she spoke. "I should have known." "No," I began, picking myself up with little effort. "I should have known," I offered with an awkward chuckle. "Your suit is comprised of a mana-resistant material, thus nullifying any pure mana-derived spells," Thasia surmised. "Correct, which explains why you simply, fell through a telekinetically derived solid plane," the princess reasoned, and she conjured up something else entirely. Another mana radiation alert landed across my HUD, this one seemingly being completely novel. As the OG alert landed across my HUD, without being immediately relegated to the shadow realm that was the notifications folder. Alert, localized search of mana radiation detected, 250% above background radiation level. What? I turned around towards the bench, which, visually, was indistinct from before. "I am testing out a theory, as it were, Emma, provided, of course, that you are willing to try again." I obliged with a curious nod of my head, sitting down once more, anticipating another fall, which never came. Instead, by some miracle, I felt resistance against my bottom half, though it was shoddy, and felt as if I'd given it any second, which prompted me to switch tactics as I attempted to force the suit to carry its own weight in this awkward position, spreading the load between this newfound cushion of air beneath me and the various actuators and locking mechanisms of my suit. I'm using a physical intermediary, Emma, Thassia finally explained. Considering mana itself cannot affect you by virtue of your suit's mana-resistant properties, I elected to use the physical property shaped through mana, this being a pocket of air acting as a cushion beneath you. That explains why it feels real cushy and floaty. I'm assuming this is a new spell that I haven't seen before, right? Air bending? I replied, prompting Thassia to nod as we finally settled in just in time for the sun to fully set. With that awkwardness behind us now, we allowed the music from the band, the rustling of the leaves, and the various noises from the carefully tailored parkland creatures around us to usher in the arrival of night. Both of our eyes were now transfixed not on the city around us, but the skies that hung above us. It was what Thassia had suspected, what her avian eyes had fixated on prior, finally peeked through the view-stray clouds being simulated. Its lights growing brighter and brighter the further into the night we went, until finally it revealed itself in all of its artificial glory. That thin grey line had, by virtue of the darkness of the night, transformed from a mere point of discrepancy set against the cloudless blue sky into a fixture of the night itself. Set against the light of the city, it almost looked as if the artificial lights of the earth had somehow climbed upwards towards the heavens, forming an impossibly long line that stretched from one side of the horizon over the top of our heads and landing somewhere behind us on the other side of the horizon. This bedazzling display of lights that twinkled brighter than any star above the city seemed to capture the Avanar in a trance as she sat there, her back completely straight and her body unmoving whilst the stars above acted as a sort of backdrop that gave Earthring 2 that extra sense of depth and closeness. Its form and structure seemingly framed by both the darkness of space and the brightness of the stars, giving it a sense of closeness which hinted at its true proximity to Earth, a fact which became all the more obvious the longer one sat and squinted at the finer details of its form, as several details popped out upon closer inspection. From its two indentations that ran parallel to one another along its main superstructure, to the industrial zones nestled within which helped to spare contemporary Earth from the strains of heavy and dirty industry. This man-made extension of Earth's reach was all but highlighted for Thassia to see. Moreover, unlike the stars that twinkled every few seconds, Earthring's lights remained consistently bright and unyielding. The effect of its closeness granted it an almost otherworldly prominence as it simply sat there, staring down on the earth below and acting as a consistent reminder of humanity's permanent influence on the space beyond the confines of the home world. Minutes passed as the acoustics and strings of the band were accompanied by the synth of electronic pianos and the jamming of tambourines, before finally it reached its climax, culminating in a jazzy sing-along by all the members of the band. "Stars above," Thassia managed out under a hoarse whisper, after a good few minutes of utter silence, serenaded dutifully by the band. "And this is only part of the circumference, isn't it?" I was taken aback by the question, doing a complete double-take as Thassia looked at me expectantly for an answer. "Yes," I managed out truthfully, "but how did you—" "It spans across the horizon, Emma." She traced the light up from one end of the horizon to the other behind us. "This must mean it wraps around your world." Questions started erupting in my head, left and right. Questions of just how far the Avanar's knowledge on their world actually extended to, given the Nexus's meddling. But all of those thoughts were quelled when I realized that Thassia's kinds were capable of flight, which meant that such things would be a given to them. Yeah, it does, though that's just part of it. What you see above your head right now is Earthring 2, the additional offshoot of Earthring 1. Thassia's expression did not shift from that look of absolute disbelief as she let out a slow sigh of acknowledgement. "So your kind, have done this before, and succeeded?" "Yes," I answered, with a confident nod. "And we've done so around other stellar bodies as well." I allowed that to sink in for a few moments, allowing the silence to be taken up by the swells of the music before continuing. "As I told the library before, Thassia, my kind have braved the inhospitable depths that lie beyond the heavens and chose to thrive within the hostile conditions, making the inhospitable hospitable by constructing and confining ourselves artificial bubbles of hospitable environments. In a way, we're taking a bit of home everywhere we go." such as the tent that you've brought to the Nexus and the suit that you are currently trapped within, Thasia reasoned. Correct, I nodded. The spirit of adventure, of pioneering exploration for the sake of discovery, is innate to our kind, I reasoned, prompting a small smile to form along the edges of the Avenar's beak. And so too ours, Emma, she acknowledged with a swell of optimism, only tempered by what she would say next, at least prior to the Nexian reformations. There was another silence that punctuated that shift in tone, as Thasia let out a sigh of conflicting emotions. There are stories kept within oral tradition within my tainted line of knowledge of the abyss that envelops our world. We once had at least an inkling of what you speak of, and an intense fascination with breaking into that abyss, through the barrier that exists beyond the envelope of flight. It just so happens that we first developed the ability to pierce the space between realities before we were able to pierce the barrier between the sky and the abyss that lies beyond it. It was so much to unpack from just the statements alone, as I found myself the one that was questioning the nature of the narratives of things, instead of it being just Thasia to do so. It was clear now that both of us were experiencing a world of revelations as we sat against the hologram, looking up at what lay beyond. Thank you, Emma, for showing me that those distant dreams, at least in one adjacent realm, have become a tangible reality. The wisps and the echoes of a lost generation may now finally rest knowing their wild theories and eccentric aspirations were, in fact, not made in vain. Thasia managed wild thoughtfully, through an emotional break. As she leaned closer towards both me and the stars, her eyes transfixed on what no longer was an intangible dream. Thank you for showing me that fantastical lands can still exist beyond the confines of a magical world. Dragon's Heart Tower, level 23, residence 30. Emma and Thasia's bedroom, local time 23:20. Emma. Our stargazing went on for longer than I'd anticipated, but not a single one of those minutes was a time that I'd trade for anything else, even if the rest of the time was spent in silence. Thasia perhaps being too lost in her thoughts to truly commit to anything else of note she wanted to ask or discuss, which was probably for the better, considering those conversations could lead us down so many rabbit holes, jumping off points best reserved for when we embarked on our trips to Earthring itself and the planets that lay beyond. More to the point, there was still the issue of reports that I had to file, and considering everything that's happened thus far, there was going to be a lot of write-ups to do so. All right, better get this over before things inevitably get real busy tomorrow. I spoke to no one but myself as I moved to situate one of the foldable chairs in front of the field desk. Soon enough, I had myself a setup that would make a TSEC officer proud, with holographic virtual displays and environmental readouts appearing shortly thereafter, following a quick donning of my augmented reality glasses. There, the EVI had more or less loaded up the same HUD view from my helmet, except this time there were a total of 3 distinct virtual monitors confined to the desk space, acting as my windows into the reality of a modern officer's life. Military bureaucracy. Bring up the weekly report form, EV. Acknowledged query IAS, LREF, or UNA, Cadet Booker. Right, I mentally chastised myself. They all require their own submission pathways, don't they? Correct, Cadet Booker. Right, I'm giving priority to the IAS report form. Then the LREF. The contents of the two should be easily enough to transplant into the UNA's form. Acknowledged. The EVI responded affirmatively, pulling up all of the forms that were, thankfully, already partially filled in by the EVI. All of those sections consisted of complex sensor readings and the pertinent scientific findings, accounting for good 80 to 90% of the docs. And here I thought you refused to help me, I teased, referencing the EVI's response to my pleas for help with the reports from an earlier conversation at Sorkar's workshop. I was referring to what is explicitly the Mission Commander section of the report, Cadet Booker. I nodded affirmatively at that. All that was left for me to do now was to file my section of the report and perhaps review some of the datasets the EVI had filled in. All right, here goes nothing. Dear Diary, Cadet Booker, that is improper. I know. I was joking around there, Evie, I offered with a teasing chuckle before deleting that affront to academic register and professional cadence and beginning the real report. External correspondence, UNSA, IAS Mission Commander's report beneath demarcated line. Preamble. Exo-reality threshold successfully crossed. Sole agent and de facto mission commander status is nominal. Refer to EVI cross-analysis confirmation here. Mana-resistant equipment remains nominal. Contact established with designated handlers and representatives of the local authority. Local authorities belonging to the sole contract prior to mission onset, known as Nexus, to be preemptively and tentatively considered hostile, though full analysis is pending and primary datasets to be compiled and compressed. Theft of the ECS was noted by and confirmed representative of the Nexus, and subsequent anti-tampering countermeasures were activated following a failure to reclaim and defuse within the allotted time. New priority mission to take precedence, reconstruction of ECS utilizing local exotic materials. Discovery of new polities distinct and separate from Nexus has been made. Full details to follow within the report. New polities are to be referred to by the local designator, adjacent realms. Threat assessment pending. More data is needed. Diplomatic channels have been opened with 2, potentially 3 adjacent realms via representatives with direct familial ties to incumbent dynasties, ruling families. Full details to follow within the report. Survey of Nexus to be the Transgression Academy for the Magical Arts, Betrayans Hall, local time 23:25. Professor Vanavan, blue-robed assistant to the dean. Determined at a later time, as per the grace and mercy of the enlightened deliberations of Her Excellency, Onoya Rouse Frightel, Captain of the Inner Guard, beholder of His Eternal Majesty's enlightened truth, and stedholder of the lands of the Eternal Rivers, I, as second to the Dean of the Transgression Academy of the Magical Arts, am to report on my personal and official experiences with the anomalous actor that shall henceforth be referred to as the Blue Knight, a moniker of convenience and not one of honor. My experience with the Blue Knights has thus far been nothing short of exceptional. Exceptional with regards to her unconventional arrival. Exceptional with regards to her unconventional character. Exceptional with regards to her command of High Nexian. Exceptional with regards to her capacity for tenacious resilience and her commitment to her oaths of loyalty, which remain, at least to my experience, the purest and most resolute. Exceptional as a result of her resistance to the face of overwhelming odds. Exceptional as a result of her anomalous proclivities. I shall refrain, as per my academic standing and my reluctance to reach conclusions without the wisdom of my betters and peers, from commenting on the true nature of these anomalous proclivities, for I know not the rumors of mannerless capabilities, born of an unknown means, vested in an intent to do harm. I know only what I see, and report only what I observe, with limitations stemming from the observations being a fault of my own oversight. With that being said, it is important to note that the new realmer, that her, that is what she, that is what that... I stopped myself from writing any further, as I placed both hands firmly on my head, squeezing my temples tight. The situation I found myself in is one that I wished never to have happened, for this situation is delicate. The circumstances are unprecedented. The actors involved and the machinations at play are beyond a shadow of a doubt the very type I thought I'd eluded following my voluntary exile away from such life. However, I would be remiss to say that the Transgression Academy for the Magical Arts was never not a hotbed of political activity. It was, for all intents and purposes, established with the intent of facilitating the bubbling relationships between adjacent realms after all, with a careful and observant eye of the enlightened regime maintaining vigilance over every step. But it was never truly a battle map worth a crownland's eye, for nothing truly reality-shattering ever happened or developed within the walls of its esteemed academy, making it the ideal place that I'd hoped would become my quiet and secluded slice of uncorrupted academia. This week changed that, and I am not prepared. I took a moment to step away from the papers that littered my desk, papers marked by the seals of institutions and stamps of establishments that I'd wished never to associate myself with following my start of my tenure. My eyes all but glazed over at the sight of it all, my breath stuttering, and my heart remaining anything but calm before I attempted to regain focus, placing my sights instead on the room that lay before me, the lecture hall. My lecture hall. I breathed in, focusing on both the air which nourished my body and the manner which nourished my soul, as I allowed time itself to become the judge of the two worlds that threatened to tear me apart at the seams. The lecture hall was ready, with every inch of every surface polished and buffed to perfection. Spells born of my own creativity, making certain that no dust or foreign particles would besmirch the first impressions of an impressionable group of young minds. The only thing that'll be impressed upon them will be the enlightened word of academia, and nothing else. I spoke to no one but myself, a pathetic habit that I'd grown accustomed to over the years, but a habit that kept me grounded no matter the challenge that faced me. I began walking, my steel leather and Darwinian satin shoes generating a satisfying clack following each and every step I took, as I walked up and down the incline where each of the peer group desks sat. I walked further, now weaving through all of the rows of desks from the very top of the hall to the very bottom, all the while rehearsing my lesson, all to the worrisome tune of a nagging, gnawing feeling of regrettable responsibility that all stemmed from that human knight clad in blue, the Earth-roamer, whom I'd failed. Her words following our brief and regrettable encounter immediately after the warehouse explosion still rang loud in my mind. You owe me explanation. You owe me a lot more than even that. Her screams of betrayal. You made a promise when I arrived that, of trust having been ripped and torn. I stopped at the foot of my desk, looking up at the blackboard that stretched up high towards the ceiling, before settling down at my desk once more to complete that which needed to be done. That was until I heard the unlatching of the rear entrance and the arrival of a black-robed professor's apprentice. Professor, Lariol uttered with a tired, haggard breath, your presence is required in the healing chambers. A pit quickly formed in my stomach, as if more could form given the circumstances. Of course, I acknowledged, standing up and leaving the room without so much as another word uttered. My pace was brisk, and so too was the apprentice's, as she tried to keep up in spite of her recent injuries. Professor, I must request a point of personal privilege. Go ahead, Apprentice Lariel, I acknowledged. I am not ready. The elf uttered out emphatically, or as much as she could given her tight state. I'm not ready to take his responsibilities. But you must, I responded, offering little in the way of aid or help, because it was not my place to offer such things. Because I know for a fact that you are ready. I attempted to reassure the girl as best I could. Tomorrow's classes are my own responsibility. You still have a day left to prepare for that which you have been training for. I attempted to reason with her, as we finally arrived in front of the otherwise unmarked chambers to the source of chanting that lay therein. Are you at least ready to enter, apprentice? Yes, Lariel responded, though not without a good degree of apprehension. Good, I responded with confidence, as I tried to muster up a brave face for the prospective academic. Then let us witness that which is our regrettable but necessary duty. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Sevaren Serberous, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Casper Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Sevaren Serberous. Thank you very much.